Well, Joe Pavelski and the Dallas Stars made history on Wednesday night. The Dallas Stars beat the Seattle Kraken in their first matchup, their first visit to Dallas at the American Airlines Center. And Joe Pavelski records his first 5-point game throughout his illustrious NHL career. We'll break down the entire game coming up on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, and you are locked on the Dallas Stars on this Thursday, January 13th, a victory Thursday, if you will. The Dallas Stars, like I said at the top of the show, defeating the Seattle Kraken for their inaugural matchup, 5-2 at the American Airlines Center, a game that was never really in doubt. Seattle did have the game tied at 1 early on in the first period, but Dallas Stars and their top line would put any worries to bed pretty quick after that tie. Well, before we jump into all the goodness, breaking down today's episode, listening to some post-game snippets from players and coach Roope Bowness, do you want to take a moment and say thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you get your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Remember, no matter how you listen or where you listen, the show is always 100% free, and you can always rate and review if you like what you hear. But without any further hesitation, let's get right into breaking down last night's Dallas Stars win, starting with our star of the game. And I don't think this is too hard for anyone who watched this game or knows how this game went down, but Joe Pavelski, easily far and away my star of the game, and I know was earning the top star, the first star, if you will, for the game. Lindell, Roope Hintz, Joe Pavelski winning the third, second, and first star of the game, respectively. But as I said to open the show, Joe Pavelski records his first 5-point game in his NHL career, which to me was just crazy, almost unbelievable. A guy who's been in the league as long as he's been in the league, just now recording his first 5-point game, and a guy who's as skilled as he is. I guess better late than never, but certainly crazy to me. A guy that's been playing at such a high level for so long, never recording 5 points, probably knocked on the door several times, probably several 4-point and 3-point games in his career, but finally nice of him, to finally cross that landmark at age 37 with 2 goals and 3 assists. And his teammate and third star of the game, Lindell, spoke a little bit about having Joe Pavelski on the team and just how they felt kind of about his big night. So here's Lindell on Joe Pavelski.
Well, he's big-time competitor. I like actually playing against him in practice, and because I feel they're a really, really good line. And back in the days when he was in San Jose, it was kind of trouble every night to play against him. He's such a good run around the net front, so it's always a tough battle against him. So we're lucky to have him in our team.
I think one of the coolest things to hear Esa talk about is how Joe Pavelski's always been a consistent threat in this league, even, throwing it back to his days in San Jose, always a guy that Esa says, is dangerous to be matched up against, a guy you always have to be on the lookout for. And, there were guys in the post-game presser asking him like, oh, is it good to practice? What's it like practicing against Joe every single day? And that's kind of where that answer stemmed from, as he's a difficult guy to guard, especially for a defenseman like Lindell. And as several other defensemen are finding out, there's really no one in this league that can guard Joe Pavelski and this Dallas Stars top line at an effective level. And so I think that that's a good thing for the defensemen on this team, is they have to practice against Joe and this top line every single day, as it helps them improve defensively, because there's a ton of other really good offensive lines out there, and the Stars are going to be running into those over this weekend in, whenever they play Florida and Tampa Bay. So I think really, really interesting insight from Esa on Joe Pavelski, just where he's at in his career and just having him on the team. And, Coach Roope Bowness had some things to say as well about how his team looks up to Joe Pavelski. So let's take a moment and listen to what Coach Bowness had to say about Joe.
Everyone was looking for him, and and everybody on the bench was cheering for him. So listen, he's a great team player. He's obviously a great player and had a great night. But you could just tell, I mean, the whole bench was watching. The whole bench was excited, and every time he shot the puck, they were cheering for him to get that it would go in. So, listen, he's a great player, he's a great teammate, and you knew the whole team and the whole rink was cheering for him to get that third goal. Again, it's his ability to sniff out the loose pucks, his ability to get in the open, and his anticipation of where that puck is going. And again, great poise around the net. Knowing where to put the goal scorers, know where to put the puck. You can put other guys some of those situations, and they're not going to have the natural instinct of where to put the puck on the goalie. Joe has that touch. He has great touch around the net, but you see him every day on the ice working at it. It's not like it's a fluke, and he works at it every day, and it's good for a game like tonight to get rewarded. So, but he has just got natural offensive instincts that you can't teach the instincts that he has of where to put the puck at the right time, at the right timing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that, and I'm in the midst of all of it. Coach Bowness kind of took in the moment of the bench is going crazy for Joe to get this third goal at the end of the game. And if you watched the game, you saw how close he got. Quite a few shots on net in the final 30 seconds of the game. The crowd was absolutely loving it. Really, really wanted Joe Pavelski to get this hat trick. The bench, as Coach Bowness was saying, wanted him to get this hat trick. And I think it's really interesting and really cool to hear Rick Bowness talk about a guy like Joe Pavelski. Hockey coaches sometimes, I'm sure that they do like their players, love their players, even to some degree. But just to kind of hear Rick talk about Joe the way that he did, talking about how you can't teach what he does. You can't teach the intangibles that he has, which is just his hard work for sniffing out the puck, working hard every single day, being the first guy out on the ice at practice, working on his redirects in front of the net, working on his rebounds in front of the net. Just, a guy that coaches love to have. And I know Rick Bowness certainly loves having him, just the way he plays and also the way that he carries himself as a leader on this team. Certainly a great asset for this Dallas Stars team. And we've been talking a lot about Joe Pavelski, hearing from his coach, one of his teammates, but let's hear from the big man himself on how it felt to have his first 5-point game in his NHL career.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun night. The puck's going on the net. We're getting a lot of chances. The fifth one, usually when you have a night where you put a few points on the board, it's your line mates have been really good, which was a big part of the case here tonight. And, you get a little lucky when a face off and puck, gets the one in the empty netter. So it was good, but the line was great. The D, we found, as we used them, we had a lot of space in the zone, and we were able to create some chances.
And I think the great thing from hearing this clip and just seeing him play last night is knowing how much fun Joe Pavelski is having just being a part of this Dallas Stars team. And even at this point in his career, you look at some guys that get older in the world of sports, you look at the NFL right now, Big Ben Roethlisberger, down to potentially his last game this weekend in the wild card round of the playoffs against the Chiefs. And I'm sure he's having fun to some degree, but I feel like there's just not this sense of, man, this guy is old, older, about to potentially retire, but he's still playing at the top of his game, still, having the time of his life. I feel like just from an outsider's perspective, you look at Big Ben Roethlisberger and the NFL, and I think there's kind of this sense that he's ready to be done. Joe Pavelski, I don't get that sense from him at all. I mean, he's playing some of the best offense we've seen from him throughout his entire career. He's playing with two of some of the best teammates that he's probably ever had. That's certainly up for debate as far as guys that he's shared a line with. But I mean, Roope and Jason are guys that complement him really well, and he complements both of their games very well. And so I think it's really, really cool to see a guy at age 37 on his second team, not his original team, having as much fun as he's having. And just, watching that as a fan makes you really feel for him, that you would love to see him get at least one more Stanley Cup run in. And I certainly hope that that comes this season. I think that this team is continuing to take steps in the right direction to continue to be a potential playoff contender, and hopefully, if they get into the postseason, a Stanley Cup contender. Moving on to the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. I want to take a moment and continue to talk about the greatness of last night's game. And we talked a lot about Joe Pavelski in that first segment, but if you really break down this game, pretty much all of the offensive success comes to credit of the top line, which is just crazy. And we'll talk a little bit about in the third segment, I feel like, we're always talking about these guys, and these guys are always stepping up to the plate, delivering in big moments, and especially delivering at home. I mean, these guys always seem to be playing very well, seem to play well with one another, but especially when the three of them are wearing the green uniforms, the black shorts in front of the hometown fans at the AAC, they seem to raise their game to the next level. We saw Jason Robertson extend his home point streak, the longest streak in the NHL as of right now, as far as home point streaks go, to 11. Roope Hintz got credited for the first goal of the game that was scored in the first 50 seconds of the game. So yet again, we see the top line donning the title of the Minutemen quite literally by scoring within the first minute of the game. Truly incredible to see, them get out to that quick start. Really, really encouraging to see them play like this at home. That's a step number one in being a great team in this league, is winning your games at home, and winning games at home against inferior competition, which the Seattle Kraken going into this game, certainly inferior competition. And I think that showed on the ice last night. So really good to see the Stars get a resounding 5-2 win over a team that they should have beaten. And it all started with that early goal from Roope Hintz to get things rolling. And, the top line, like I said, responsible for all the offense outside. I will say, side note, Yanni Hakanpää getting his first Dallas Star goal near the end of the game, an empty netter, pretty much from the other end of the ice, about a 200-foot shot. I like to imagine, that he yelled Kobe as he shot that puck down the ice. I feel like that's what I would have done, because anytime I throw something, a piece of paper into a trash can, the classic, that's what I yell. And that's what I thought whenever he shot the puck watching from the press box. So fingers crossed. Don't know if Yanni Hakanpää is a basketball fan or a Kobe Bryant fan, but that's what it made me think of. So big props to Yanni Hakanpää. Funny that now the guy that wears number 2 scores his first goal as a Dallas Star against Jamie Alexiak, who did make his return to the AAC and got a nice tribute video and a nice standing ovation from the Dallas Stars faithful. So that was really, really cool to see. Always nice to see how Stars fans welcome back former players whenever they get quick little tribute videos. Always really cool and really classy of the Dallas Stars fans to be supportive of guys that have given, their time, energy, effort to this team, and maybe not aren't part of the family anymore, at least, internally, but once a Dallas Star, always a Dallas Star. But nonetheless, I digress. This top line deserves a lot of credit for this game, and Roope Hintz himself gave a lot of credit to the Stars' success as a whole tonight, to their forechecking. So let's hear from Roope Hintz on what he had to say about the Stars and their forechecking.
Yeah, I think we forechecked today really well. I think at least those first 2 periods, we were all over them all the time, and I think that was really hard for them to break out, because someone was all the time on them. So I think we just have to keep playing like that.
Yeah, I think Roope Hintz was spot on in his assessment of the forecheck. I think especially in the first 2 periods of this game, the Stars were excellent at making sure that Seattle could not clear the defensive zone. And I think that's going to be a huge step moving forward for the Stars team as they look, especially on this 2-game road trip coming over the weekend. I think that's something they haven't done necessarily well consistently this season. There's been flashes of it. There's been a few games that they've had some really good forechecking, but there's been times where they just haven't been able to dominate the offensive zone. And I think tonight we saw, that this team, if they can dominate the offensive zone, they're eventually going to build those multiple goal leads, which is what the Stars have played best in so far this season. And then moving forward from there, sky's the limit. And especially against these teams that you should be beating, this is how you're going to come away from these games with 2 points. They didn't do it very well against Ottawa. They didn't do it very well in their first meeting against Columbus. Teams that, looking back now, they certainly should have beaten, because they seem to be a better team then. They didn't really do it in their second game against Los Angeles when they got shut out. They didn't do it in San Jose against the Sharks. I mean, I could go on and probably name some other games where they could have done better on the forecheck, and their inability to stay consistent in the offensive zone likely cost them the game, likely cost them 2 crucial points. So it was really, really good to see that from the Stars. Got a little messy in the third period, which I know Roope had kind of harped on that. And then Coach Bowness, not going to play the clip from that just because it's really short, but Coach Bowness did in his post-game presser express his distaste for how the forechecking was in the third period. Thought that Seattle had a little bit more chances down the stretch to get back into the game. Thankfully, Jake Ottinger was playing, the peak of his game in that third period, keeping Seattle off the board throughout the entire frame. So that's really good to see from number 29. Had a nice night in his own right. Feel like he's kind of being overlooked throughout all of this because it was such an explosive offensive night. But Jake Ottinger deserves a lot of credit between the pipes tonight, especially knowing that Braden Holtby was not there to back him up. But we probably will be seeing the return of Anton Hudobin sometime this weekend, either against the Panthers or Tampa Bay Lightning. But again, I do agree with Coach Bowness and Roope that the third period forechecking could have been a little better. Not sure if that was because the guys were a little tired, just because, I mean, you had played 2 periods of hockey. Still probably some sense of getting back to game shape, even though they have played a couple games since returning from their COVID hiatus. Probably still a little bit of climbing out to be done. And I think that that's something that will continue to come with time. Don't think that's, anything to be too concerned about. Rather it be bad for one period than the entire game. So I'm sure that they'll get that cleaned up over these next several days before they prepare to play these games in Florida, because it's going to be big going forward, especially against some really tough, talented teams. One of them with revenge on their mind in the Florida Panthers, teams that if you don't, dominate time in the offensive zone, they're going to dominate time in the offensive zone and make you pay and build those multiple goal deficits, which for the most part this season have been the kryptonite of the Dallas Stars. So really, really excited to see if this offense can carry this momentum coming forward. And coming up next after the break, we will talk about the Stars' upcoming road trip and kind of talk about what Coach Bowness and the players on the team want to see from the squad as a whole moving into these next 2 games. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march towards the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports betting action in 2022. It's a new year, and the new updated desktop and mobile website is the place where you can go to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to wager all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. And to close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, wanted to kind of take a moment to talk about what Coach Bowness and some of the players addressed near the end of the game, and that is helping out this top line and kind of seemingly a lack of depth, especially in last night's game against the Kraken. Really, really cool to see, Pavelski, Hintz, and Robertson get after it, combined for, however many points they had together, all scoring a goal, each being involved as far as assists on each other's goals. Really, really good stuff to see. We've been seeing it all season. There's no doubt in our mind what these guys are capable of, but something that Rick Bowness did talk about after he mentioned that this was the best top line in the NHL, confirmed by Dallas Stars head coach Rick Bowness. So clearly no bias there at all. But he did mention that it's great to see them playing well, but that they do need some help if this team is going to officially take that next step into becoming a legit playoff contender and a team that can make noise in the playoffs. Let's take a listen to what Coach Bowness had to say about all of this.
They've been doing it. They know they're going to get the opposition's best defensive pairing and the best defensive line when they can get the right matchups, and that's going to happen this weekend. And they'll have to keep playing through it. But what's really, it's important that they continue to score, but what's just as important is we've got to get someone else helping them out here. It can't be that line every night scoring all the goals. Like, somebody's got to step up here and help us and get some more pucks in the net, and it's got to come from the other forwards and the defense. But that line going to need some help, especially when you go on the road and the other team gets the last matchup. And so yeah, they need some help, and we got to get it this weekend from some other players on the team.
I also personally got to ask Joe Pavelski during the postgame presser what he thought the key was moving forward for the Stars team on this road trip, and he had a similar thing to say as Coach Bowness. So let's hear from Joe Pavelski on what he has to say about these 2 games that are coming up in Florida.
Yeah, I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We got to go. We got a handful of road games coming up, so it's important we can, the Talks start taking our game on the road with us a little bit, and play with that confidence and play with that edge, and start, finding a few wins. But I think how we do that is just by our depth, and we need, all 4 lines looking the same, competing every night. doing a lot of those little things that allow you to win on the road.
I think the biggest thing that both of them touched on, both Coach Bowness and Joe Pavelski, is just playing with depth, having all four lines of forwards playing at the top of their game, all contributing to the offensive output. Again, really nice to see the top line contributing the way that they have been. But at the end of the day, they cannot be the only ones doing that. They cannot be the only ones supplying the source of offense, because other teams are going to be able to work around that, and they're going to be able to, take advantage of all the weak spots in the rest of the Dallas Stars lineup, which, to the Stars' credit, they were missing Alexander Radulov and Denis Gurianov tonight. And so playing, a lot of guys having to play with different line mates. Of course, that top line stayed intact, but everyone else was probably playing with other people that they're not quite used to sharing the ice with. So I certainly think that that had something to do with the lack of offensive firepower we saw from, the remaining three lines tonight, especially the absence of Denis Gurianov, who seemed to really be heating up from their first three games back, especially against Florida and Pittsburgh. I think that he has finally found a great place to play alongside Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn on that second line. And of course, Alexander Radulov, even though he's not necessarily filling the score sheet this season as we would like to see him do, he's still an effective player nonetheless, still makes some really, really nice plays that often aren't rewarded in the stat sheet post game. But I certainly think missing two really key guys like that has an effect on this team as a whole. I think that they'll be able to work around that now that they're, one game in to that kind of system, because Braden Holtby and Denis Gurianov for sure will not be going to Florida because they tested positive again for COVID on Wednesday morning. Alexander Radulov, at the time of recording this, still up in the air, but since he was placed on the COVID protocol list on Wednesday, I don't think it's going to be very likely that we will see him playing in Florida. So hopefully after this game, the Stars players and coaching staff have a little bit more knowledge and intel of who needs to be on the ice when, so that way the Stars have the best chance at being successful on offense moving forward. So again, don't think it's anything to be too concerned about. These guys will come back from the COVID protocol list, even if this road trip goes poorly, which hopefully it doesn't. I think the goal going in, obviously the Stars would love to win both these games. We would love to see them win both these games. But I think if they're able to come away from this Florida road trip with at least 2 points, whether that's 2 ties or 1 win, 1 loss, I think that that's a successful road trip if they're able to at least beat one of these two teams, in the Panthers and Lightning. But things are starting to get interesting in the Western Conference wildcard race. Things are very, very tight. I think going into this game, the Stars were 6th or 7th in the wildcard spots, but after this win, they are now in the 4th wildcard spot as far as rankings go. Only 2 points behind Calgary, who's in 3rd with 40 points, and only 3 points behind San Jose, who's in 2nd with 41. So not too far off from having the 2nd wildcard spot, which would put the Stars in the postseason. Minnesota right now claiming that first wildcard spot with 44 points. A little bit higher up than the other two teams. But of course, as we know, the Central Division, absolutely chaotic. Winnipeg right behind Dallas right now with 37 points. Dallas jumping them after, Wednesday night's win. So things are going to get really interesting. But if the Stars are able to continue to rattle off wins, they can hopefully, establish themselves at least in one of those top 2 wildcard spots. And maybe if the cards fall right, they can put themselves out of the wildcard conversation and into one of those top 3 Central Division spots. But that's going to be easier said than done, because Nashville, St. Louis, Colorado, and even Minnesota, all really, really tough teams to beat on any given night. And that's not just for the Stars, that's for other teams in the NHL as well, because the Stars need to win their games, but they also need those teams to lose their games. So we'll see how it all unfolds. Really, really curious to see how this weekend unfolds for the Stars in Florida. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Stars. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, as I'll be joined yet again by Armando Velez of Locked on Panthers to preview the Dallas Stars and Florida Panthers matchup that we will be getting this time from Florida, not from Dallas. These two teams saw a lot of each other last year, and the NHL decided to just put both of their games within about a week of each other. Not sure why that is. It's probably just how the cookie crumbles. But me and Armando will be back again talking all things Panthers and Stars. You will not want to miss it. Get all the pregame information that you need from both sides of the rink. Thank you guys again for making Locked on Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day at the Locked on Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. The Locked on Bets podcast is free and available wherever you get your podcast at, as is the Locked on Stars podcast. But I'm sure you already know that because you're listening to us right now. But be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked on Stars podcast if you do not do so already. Be sure to rate and review if you have not already done that. If you like what you hear, be sure to give me a follow on Twitter as well at Dane _Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also find the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. But Stars fans, I hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you back here tomorrow for another game day edition of Locked On Stars.